Now we can look at reflexes. A reflex is a pre-programmed involuntary response to a stimulus. So this means that something happens to you and you have receptors that detect this something that happens to you. Then your sensory neurons send a signal. And then you have a response to this. So then your motor neurons will carry a command to your effector for a response. And this just happens automatically. You don't think about it. You don't consciously decide to do it. That's the involuntary part. It comes from the subconscious, either parts of your brain, or some reflexes occur just in your spine and don't even involve your brain. And reflexes are classified two ways. One of those ways is by the number of synapses. So remember, a synapse is where one neuron meets with another neuron. So we could have a sensory. So remember, sensory neurons are going to come in through the posterior root. They're going to have their cell body in the posterior root ganglion. And then they're going to come here into the posterior horn. You could then have a motor neuron that receives the neurotransmitter from that sensory. And then its axon goes out the anterior root and to the effector. So here is your sensory. Here is the motor. And you have one synapse right here. So that would be a monosynaptic. So the first way here, first type of reflex is monosynaptic. This means you have one synapse where the sensory neuron secretes neurotransmitter to stimulate the motor neuron. This is the fastest type of reflex. You cut out the middleman. You just go straight from sensory to motor. Another type is the polysynaptic. So we have our sensory comes in, cell body in the posterior root ganglion. We come here. Then we have an interneuron. And then the motor neuron. So this one uses an interneuron. An interneuron is a neuron that is entirely in the CNS. No part of it leaves the central nervous system. So now here you have synapse number 1, synapse number 2. So this is a polysynaptic. So this is where the sensory gives the information to an interneuron, and then the interneuron is what secretes neurotransmitter onto the motor neuron. So this one is a little slower because synapses slow you down, and this one has to go through 2 synapses. The other way we can classify the reflexes is by sides of the body involved. Both of the examples I've drawn so far are ipsilateral. Because the stimulus and the response occur on the same side of the body. The other type is contralateral. Contralateral involves both sides of the body. And when I say sides here, I'm referring to right and left. So if we go up here, let's draw a contralateral one. A contralateral, you would have your sensory coming in, and then we would have a motor that comes out this way. So if this receptor and the sensory information is on one side and the motor response is on the other side, that is your contralateral. Okay, now we can go through 4 examples of reflexes in the body. And this information is going to help you in lab because you're going to test some of these reflexes in lab. So the first one is withdrawal. This is just when you pull away from pain. Right? Like you touch something hot or you touch something sharp and you automatically jerk away from it. The second one is crossed extensor. This is the contralateral reflex. It involves both sides of the body, and this occurs in your lower limbs. And this is what's being shown in the pictures up here. In crossed extensor, he hurt this foot, so he had pain here. Because he's then doing the withdrawal reflex, pulling that foot away from the pain, this leg has a crossed extensor reflex. It has to support your whole body. If you didn't have the crossed extensor, you would fall down. So crossed extensor occurs in your lower limbs, and it is when one leg supports the body while the other has a withdrawal reflex. And the whole point of the crossed extensor is so you don't fall down. If you didn't have this, you'd fall down every time you stubbed your toe. The third one is the stretch reflex. This is when a body part is pulled on. Think about carrying something heavy, right? Like you're carrying a gallon of milk. That pulls on your muscles and your joints. Even if you're just holding the milk down at your side, it pulls on your muscles and joints. And you don't want to pull your joints out of socket. You don't want to tear your muscles. So whenever you pull on a body part, the muscle tightens up. So you can try this. You can hold a heavy object and just let it hang by your side, but you're holding on to it, and feel your muscles. You'll feel they're all tightened up because they're making sure you don't pull your joints out or tear your muscles. And the fourth one is the Golgi tendon reflex. This one is kind of the opposite of the stretch reflex. This inhibits you from using your full strength. You are actually stronger than you realize. So you're only using maybe about 60% or so of your full strength in daily life. Your brain purposely inhibits you from using your full strength. This is because if you did use your full strength, you would hurt yourself. Remember the people with tetanus? Their muscles would contract so violently they could break their own bones. If you went around using your full strength, you would damage your bones, you would damage your tendons, you would hurt yourself using your full strength. And the Golgi tendon reflex is what inhibits you. When it feels that your tendons and your ligaments are being pulled too much, so when it feels that your tendons are pulling, it acts to make your muscle back off. It kind of inhibits your muscle from contracting anymore. And this is where you may have heard stories of, like, in extreme life or death situations, people get super strength, because in a life or death situation, you can override this and use more of your strength. And I have a funny story about this. My friend Laura went through a phase where she was really into chickens. And she went and bought this very expensive, fancy chicken. She had to drive several hours to get it. And she's on her way home with this chicken in a cage in the back of her truck. And she just spent like hundreds of dollars on this chicken. And she's in McDonald's having lunch, and she looks out the window and she sees that the chicken has gotten out of its cage and it is perched on the side of the truck ready to jump out and into the highway and get hit by a car. So she panics. She goes running out of McDonald's into the parking lot, jumps into the bed of the truck, doesn't stop to climb in or anything, just leaps and makes it into the bed of the truck, grabs the chicken, gets it back in the cage, saves the day. But it's hilarious because she is not an athletic person at all. And if you were to offer her $1 million, there's no way she could make that leap into the back of the truck again. She just saw her chicken about to get ran over, and she panicked, and she overcame this Golgi tendon and used her full strength.